What's up, electronic dance music producer? Low end in your tracks are most probably muddy. And here's the real truth. It's most probably not a mixing issue, it's a decision making issue. Now, I want to jump into one of my tracks. This is a track that I've produced a couple of years ago. I decided not to release it for multiple reasons. Our direction changed, etc. If you want to check out our music, or we're called Hokey, I'll most probably put a link down there. But you'll get to see quickly how the decision making here makes all the difference when it comes to your low end, and if your low end is muddy or tight and all these words that we use. Now let's jump into it. Let's check out this track. I'm just going to play like this section of the track, and then we'll kind of dive into like the main decision making issues that are most probably making your track sound muddy, especially in the low end. So, a small kind of like disclaimer before we start, like this track is not fully mixed and it doesn't really matter. It's just instruments are placed, it's the arrangement that's important at this point. And a lot of what we do right now is much more on the edgier side of things. But I wanted to pick this track because I feel like this is a melodic, dancier track, which a lot of you would relate to, versus the new stuff we do that's very edgy and very different. But let's jump into it. Like, what makes the low end muddy? The low end of this track is very, very clean. You hear the kick drum, it's tight, and you hear the bass line clearly, and they both make room for each other, and that's it. It's that simple. That's how your mids are clean. There's two instruments. Now, let's look at one of the most important things. When producers talk about low end, muddy, they're always thinking about mixing. And this topic kind of pisses me off in a sense that, you know, when everyone keeps on repeating the same thing, but everyone is wrong. I mean, I'm an expert in this. I've been doing this for a long time. I manage a mix and mastering studio and mixed and mastered thousands of tracks. Like, I know what mixing is. I'm an expert at it. I've lived off it. But what I'm getting at here is why do people always talk about mixing when it comes to muddiness? The main reason your track is muddy is because your arrangement is off. Like, arrangement meaning like the set of instruments that you're layering together collectively are what's causing the muddiness. It's not an EQ trick. And it's not like you EQing properly and putting millions of notches or figuring out ways to cut aggressively or surgically to be able to make room. If you are ending up there, you most probably have missed on the most important aspect, which is the arrangement. And that's what I want to talk about to you right now, and how this will completely clear up your low end right away with the proper decision making. Like, I regularly get messages from producers that like give me tips or tricks I haven't really asked for, but I mean, I'm always open to hearing what people have to say. And every conversation at our levels is very detailed and nuanced, and a lot of times it's like everything's mix oriented. If you did this, you'll get like that 0.5% more, but who cares about the 0.5% if the track sucks? And the most important thing is that the track sounds amazing. And as a matter of fact, very quick story before I jump into it, like when I used to tour, we used to write tracks, like put tracks last minute together, or if we had shows in our city and we had, let's say, a show on Friday night and it's Thursday, we're coming up with a track, we put a track together. I didn't really care about the mixing, and we used to play in our sets before and after professionally released tracks on labels, you guys know, and my track in the middle, not even properly mixed. But the decision making in production was so strong that no one could tell the difference between which one's professional, which one's not, because it sounded amazingly produced. So I get very agitated at this topic that people spend so much energy on mixing details that don't matter. Anyways, Rant done. Let me jump into it. So one thing I want to point out, we got the kick in the bass. We hear it together. This is what it sounds like. I had a small glitch in my computer there. There's a lot of sessions running, a lot of tracks running, but very basic, a very clean cut. If we look at the top layers, it's got the drums, the pads, the plugs. Just these like four groups of instruments, the drums, the pads, the plucks, and the leads. Effects don't really matter; they're very minimal, and vocals come in at specific spots, especially on the drop section. So what's really the body of the track, like when we talk about the arrangement of the instruments, is the drum group. I never use this many drums. I usually use a couple of layers, but I just experimented here in terms of layering. Don't watch this and say Vardy has millions of drum layers, I should have millions of drum. No, you don't. You actually don't. I was just having fun on this track. If you look at a lot of my other tracks, I don't have a lot of layers. Anyways, that's a whole different discussion. Let's leave that for another time. So drums, pads, plucks, and leads. I've soloed them, so kick and drummers are not playing. Now, if you look at the master EQ, and I don't even have an elaborate mastering chain. That's another topic, which is not even important. Doesn't matter if your track sounds good. It sounds good, regardless. Let's look at the low end. When we talk about the low end, because this training is about your low end, whatever's like in this overall region of the track. When we realize that only kick and bass should exist there, right? That's how we arrange the rest of the instruments on top of it. So let me play these four main groupings, which encompass the entirety of the track minus the kick and the bass, and let's see what's happening in this region. What's happening? There is no signal happening, which tells us that if we play the kick and the bass, they predominantly exist in this region. This is the body of the kick and the bass. So what does this tell us? First off, whenever you're stacking instruments on, just be mindful. How can I keep my low end simple? Your low end is your kick and your bass. Specifically, your sub is the sub of the kick and the sub of the bass. It's no more complicated than that. If other instruments have frequencies down there, cut them off. I'm just going to give you quick examples. Like if we look at the pads right here, there's not much really happening. There's not much really happening in this region. And same for the plucks and same for the leads. So first things first, when we isolate in our minds that my low end is just kick and bass only, then we're a good starting point. You might say this is simple, but it's like, are you actively thinking about this? And if you are, this is one of the biggest steps for you to know that if we're dealing with just two instruments in the low end, then it's as simple as that. It doesn't need to be more complex than why is my low end muddy all the time? You're just shoving a lot of things in there, maybe layers of bass, not properly cleaning out. Do you realize how we haven't talked about any mixing tools so far? And this is one of the most important things about having your low end clean. Instrumentation arrangement wise, you need to make sure that your low end, your anything in this overall region is occupied by the sub of the kick and the sub of the bass, and that's it. That's the end of the story. That's where it stops. Now, additional elements to make sure that your low end is not muddy. You want your kick to be tight. You don't want it to engulf the entire track. And you want your bass to properly make way for the kick, which we call sidechaining. So let's look at number 2, which is the tightness of the kick. If you look at how the kick sounds, I don't even, in my EQ, I haven't even cut out, this is just like a automation that's happening, but if I click here, see, I'm not really cutting out anything in the kick because I have a good sample. Listen to your sample. If it sounds good, there's not much you need to do to it. Yes, you could compress a little bit, and we're not going to talk about that in this training because we could talk forever about that stuff. Overall, if you have a good sound a good source. There's not much to do with it in general. What I want you to look at though is I'm not shaving off low ends. I'm not doing surgical cuts. If you find yourself doing surgical cuts, there's an issue with the sample. Change a sample. These days we have sample packs with like the best kick drums in the world. Like it's not like back in the day. And even back in the day, that's a whole different conversation. There was awesome kick drums, but through time, like when we're selecting sounds, like go through your sounds, listen to a sound that has a good body to the kick. It doesn't need to be perfect because a perfect kick doesn't exist. Once you find a kick that has a good body and a good presence in the track, you could build the track around it too. So I could pick 17 different kicks that I don't like that much, and I could build an amazing track around it. Right? So it's not that a perfect kick exists, but just pick a sample of a kick that actually sounds good. And what's important in terms of the tightness, you want to make sure that the kick itself is not occupying too much space. If your kick sub, this is the sub of the kick, is expanding too long across the other or getting too close to what's happening before the kick, the track doesn't have space to breathe because the kick itself will devour the rest of your track. So keep this tight. Keep the sub a bit more tight. Don't let it be too long, at least for dance music in the ranges that anywhere from 100 BPM to even up to 140 and up. You want to make sure there's a bit of space between the kicks for the bass to breathe. When it comes to the bass, now this is audio. It used to be MIDI. I flattened it for the sake of showing you guys this training so my computer doesn't explode. But the low end as well, I don't need to cut or do any type of weird EQs like this. None of that shit is important. It's not. I'm telling you. Listen to the bass. First of all, does the bass sound good? Do you like it? It has a bit of an envelope on the attack because every time there's a hit, it opens up. The filter opens up, it closes quickly to add a bit of impact. It's a soft, warm sounding bass, which I'm happy with. It doesn't have a rhythm per se, aside from the notes that are playing there. And it's a clean sound. And in between, there is an LFO that's slowly opening and closing the filter. I'm going by memory, but just by listening to the sound, I know the sound design of it. So all this being said, like, don't need to do like surgical cuts of this sort in your low end. It's really not necessary. Why? Because there's engineering reasons why that's not necessary or that's not important, but just overall thinking, when our low end arrangement wise is clean meaning there's not many things being played. There's only two instruments being played, your kick and your bass. There's not much cleaning you need to do. When the kick comes, the bass moves out of the way. And when there's no kick, the bass could stay there because there's nothing else being played. We don't need to further complicate it by adding tools. Now, I'm trying to simplify this as much as possible because the answer is in the simplicity of it. The amount of producers I've worked with, from professionals, intermediates to beginners, we even see this in professionals. It's mind-blowing how conversations are always around the mix. Right? And it's like the low end doesn't feel like tight enough. Great. Tighten up your kick, clean up all your lows, just leave kick and bass, and make sure that your bass is aesthetically what you want. Open up some space for whenever your kick is playing for your bass to get out of the way. These are the main things that you think about when it comes to the clarity of your low end. I am completely against like having millions of EQs and compressors because none of that really matters. It's very, very simple. You could have a few EQs for specific, let's say, controls that you want to have, but overall thinking comes back to the same thing. What do we have instrument-wise? If I had a pad here that dipped below the 100, I'm going to ask myself, why is that necessary? It might not even be necessary. I'll clean it up. That will open up some space for the bass. Now, when we look at sidechaining in general, there's a chain here that I don't want you guys to worry too much about. It's not that important for this conversation. This is a mixing chain, but it's not the mixing chain itself that's making it sound great. It's the arrangement and the instrumentation of it. So step one is for us to say, with all the main bodied instruments like the drums, the pads, the plucks, and the leads, when we solo them together, are we seeing anything in the low end? If we don't see anything in the low end, that means our low end is clean. Then we turn the kick and the bass, and we tell ourselves the kick and the bass are living in the low end. There's two instruments, and the rule is whenever the kick comes in, the bass moves out of the way, which is side chaining. And I use side chaining with two different compressors. I use one for the pump. I do a faster pump so it doesn't give a drag. And I have another pump that happens here in the low end for the sub to get out of the way. Because this is not a side chaining training, right? I'm not gonna, we could talk a lot about side chaining, and I'll do these types of trainings down the line. But what I want to focus on is like, you could side chain many different ways. You could use one compressor, two compressors. You could use LFO tools. You could use shaper box, and the list goes on. There's another one I forgot, but there's so many of them. Basically, the idea is when an instrument comes in, we want the other one to get out of the way in a specific region. That is side chaining, meaning whenever the kick comes in, you want the bass to get out of the way. If you have two instruments in your low end, kick and bass, and if whenever the kick comes in, the bass gets out of the way, that's it. Your low end is clean. Add on top of that the fact that you want your kick to be tight. You don't want the sub to wobble on too long until the next kick. That will give you enough space for the sidechain to come back in and the track to breathe in between, and then you're happy the way it is. From that point on, if your low end's clean, if you know the bass and the kick are in the low end and you're side chaining properly, and you still feel like your kick doesn't, your low end doesn't sound good, then we go into composition. We ask ourselves, are we happy with what we wrote on the bass line? Because we might not be happy with the bass line. Or we look at sound design. We ask ourselves, are we using the right kick or the right bass sound? But that is not even a muddy situation anymore. It's not a question whether the track is muddy or not. You're just not happy with the sound selection. But we didn't use any mixing tools here. The only mixing tool that we used is side chaining. And in reality, side chaining at early stages in production is more of a production tool than it is a mixing tool. We're just pumping. Yes, you could say in a sense of getting the bass out of the way of the kick, it could be considered a mixing tool. But in reality, it's more of you're pumping it out too. So it's a combination of a production and a mixing tool, but nothing more complicated than that. And if you find yourself, please, like having multiple like plugins one after the other, and you don't know what you're really doing with each one of them, most probably the mistake is in that. So to summarize, and I want to drive this home, first things first, we want to check on the arrangement. If we look at everything that's happening in the track on top of the kick and the bass, which in this case are these four groups, and if we listen to it, are we seeing anything in the low? If you do see elements, cut it out, clean it out, ask yourself, maybe I should raise, maybe that instrument doesn't need to be there, or maybe I should raise the octave. And secondary to that, ask yourself, is my kick and the bass in the low end, are they being sidechained properly? And if they are, is my kick tight enough? Make sure you select the sample or tighten up the sample by reducing the length of the sub. Because if that's too long, it's going to wobble too much, and then your low end is going to feel too wobbly. These are the starting points for you to be able to make sure that you have a track where the low end is not muddy. Now, guys, my education style is not about plugins. Yes, we talk about plugins and we jump into plugins and we geek out a little bit, but not to the detriment of missing the point. The point of the track is that when we listen to it, it needs to feel good. It's not going to please everyone in the world, but at least you're going to find your fans. But overall, it sounds mature. Things are where they need to be, and the emotion is communicated. That's what production is all about, nothing else. Now, we do geek out sometimes on plugins, but if we're missing the point, we stop geeking out and go back to fundamental questioning. What is the main issue here in the track? And 99% of the time, your low end is muddy, not because of mixing tools or you not understanding mixing very well. It's the decisions in your production. So in our program, we focus a lot on this. And you'll always find me like bringing a student back from the abyss of tool usage and plugin usage to bring them back and make them realize like, hey, we're focusing on the right thing, wrong thing. We need to focus on the right thing. If you need any help, any proper deep dive, if you're a serious producer that really wants to get good at production, not just learn new tools and confuse yourself even more, We really dive in with producers. We help them become professionals through the process, because we are professionals. We've been professionals for the last decade, and we help producers become professionals as well. If that's you, if you identify yourself as a serious producer, you found this helpful in terms of changing your mindset and your thinking on simplifying your decisions, we could help you further. You could book in a call with us. We could chat, and we could take it from there. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, comment below. Love you all. We'll speak soon. See ya.